You guys see my screen?
Yep.
Cool. So there was a question I believe Aziz asked, which I'm actually shocked he's not here, so something must have happened. But he was asking how to lose fat without losing muscle, right? So if you're cutting, if you're going through a process where you're trying to slim down, you're trying to lean down, get a six pack, all of that, how do you do that without getting too skinny and losing the muscle that you've been building or that you are currently building at that moment, right? So basics of fat loss. So to lose fat, you have to be in a caloric deficit, as everybody who's in remotely into fitness understands that concept, right? Fat loss and weight loss are obviously not the same. One person could be 200 pounds, another person could be 200 pounds, and they can look completely different, right? So the biggest thing is understanding which one you want to kind of focus on. Most people, they should be focusing on fat loss because realistically, they don't need to lose like weight overall. They just need to like reduce the fat that's on their body, right? So that way their body composition can look a lot better, which is why when people go through dramatic weight loss, they tend not to look too good because they didn't really build muscle during that process. They didn't retain the muscle that they had. They went on extreme like diets where they were probably at like 1,500 calorie deficits and their body just couldn't sustain. So that's why you see like the Ozempic bodies and you see people like that because they went through like a very intense process, right? So you have to understand the difference between fat loss and weight loss. And people who typically go on like a fat loss journey, they tend to look a lot better because their body fills out a lot better. They tend to build a lot more muscle because they're focused mostly on that versus fat loss. Fat loss is more of a byproduct of building muscle and being in a caloric deficit, right? So you cannot spot reduce fat. It's another thing people don't understand. You can't just cut fat in your midsection and nowhere else. You can only reduce fat around your entire body at once. So you have to optimize for that specifically. Weightlifting can help you reduce body fat and boost your metabolism. So that essentially leads to burning a lot more calories. And you want to focus on drinking less of your calories. A lot of people, they overspill on their caloric intake because they're drinking most of their calories. They're drinking soda, which obviously is not the greatest unless you're doing Diet Coke or something along those lines. That's fine because it's 0 calorie. But most of the other smoothies, a lot of the milkshakes that you're drinking probably have more calories than like regular food, right? So you want to be able to reduce that if you're on that path. So why people lose muscle when trying to lose fat? So they severely undereat, cutting their calories so low that it slows their metabolism down. Most people don't understand a lot of the whole idea of losing fat, the reason why you can lose fat, the reason why I can still lose fat while sitting here and not working out is because my metabolic rate is extremely high. So people don't optimize for a higher metabolic rate. They really just optimize for under eating and seeing that, oh, if I do a caloric deficit, if I do more of a deficit, then I'm going to lose even more weight. But there's so many other variables, such as your metabolic rate, that pretty much factor into whether you're going to lose fat at a significantly shorter period of time or it's going to take you a long time. And that's where you'll see a lot of people plateau, where they get to this weight where they can't just get down to that weight, or even when they increase in weight, if you're trying to build muscle, if you're trying to like gain more weight, you have to make sure that your metabolism is working with the goals that you're looking for. All right. So the second thing that people do is that they do not consume the right macronutrient ratio, right? So this allows for muscles to break down and not recover properly. So if they're not eating enough protein, if they're not eating enough carbs that they need, that then convert, or if they're not eating enough fats for their body, then they will not recover properly, and their body will feed in on those muscle groups just because it does not have the macronutrients to be able to sustain itself, right? So due to under eating, basically going way below your caloric maintenance, the body does not have the fuel it needs. And like I was saying, it feeds on the muscle. And that's what people don't understand about making sure that you know what your macros are. So that way you don't have to worry about your body losing muscle while you're trying to be in a caloric deficit. Let's see. Let me make this twice. I sure did. Okay. So how do you keep or gain muscle while cutting, right? This is important. I like to call this like lean bulking. This is what I swear by. I've done this for years. This is essentially like how I do it. So you want to stay within a 300 to 500 caloric deficit in relation to your maintenance calories. You can track your maintenance calories by You go on Google, type in free calorie calculator, you'll be able to find what your maintenance calories are. It can even suggest what a specific deficit could be based on your goals too. And then from there, you calculate the proper macronutrients, so your carbs, your fats, your proteins that fall within that total caloric intake in that 300 to 500 calorie deficit, right? So that's where people they tend to mess up. They don't calculate the total caloric deficit that they're in or the total caloric intake that they have based on the deficit. They track everything based on their maintenance, right? So they're going to have all of their macronutrients based on their maintenance calories, and they don't actually factor in the fact that they're in a deficit. So that's where you can actually get an accurate consumption rate of like, okay, how many of these macronutrients do I need based on this specific cut that I'm doing? Again, you want to consume 1.1 to 2.2 grams of protein per lean body mass. This is important because a lot of people think this is you want to consume 1.1 to 2.2 grams of protein just overall for your total weight. That's incorrect. You want to do it for how much actual muscle mass that you have. That's how you track it. So you want to be able to do that, you find your total weight, you subtract it by the amount of water weight that you have, as well as the amount of fat that you have, right, on your body, which obviously your body fat percentage is the percentage of your total weight. So you can take that percentage, find the actual number for that, and then subtract it from your total body weight. But that's kind of what it takes in terms of protein. You always want to calculate that first because then that'll help you be able to calculate the other macros that are pretty much filling in based on that amount of protein that you need per lean body mass. Next, you want to consume about 5 grams of creatine monohydrate daily. This is very important because one, it helps a lot with recovery. Two, your body naturally has it, so it's something. It's not like artificial. People are afraid of creatine. Creatine is really good for recovery, and it allows for you to keep the muscle that you have as well. Eat nutrient-dense whole foods and avoid liquid calories, like I mentioned. Eating nutrient-dense whole foods will allow for you to be satiated, just like with when you focus on protein, right? So that way you don't feel like you're starving, even if you're in a slight deficit. And you will feel like you're eating a lot more when you're significantly eating less, which will help you maintain the lean look while also keeping the muscle that you want. Then the secret here where most people mess up, and this is where I've gotten all of my clients the best results. You want to slowly increase your calories as your metabolic rate increases. And you'll be able to see this if you don't have something that can track your metabolic rate. You'll know because you'll start to get really hungry, right? So when you are in a caloric deficit, let's say you're in a 500 calorie deficit, you'll start to feel like, okay, this is a lot of food. I can eat this because you're eating a whole food diet. And then over time, over like a 1 to 2 month period, you'll start to get a little bit hungrier and hungrier and hungrier. And that's just a sign that your metabolic rate is increasing. And that's a sign that you need to feed your body more. And as your metabolic rate increases, you will be able to burn that fat a lot faster and more effectively. So you want to keep that going. Where most people mess up is that they keep that caloric deficit for way too long and they plateau, and then they go into even more of a deficit, and so their body's starving, so their metabolic rate was going up and they cut their calories down even more, so it couldn't catch up to their metabolic rate, so their body needed some sort of energy outside of what they were consuming to be able to actually sustain itself, which is why it started feeding up on a lot of the muscles that they have, which is why people lose muscle when they cut, right? So this is pretty much how you keep or you gain muscle as well. If you're in a caloric deficit, you can make sure that you hit that protein intake, which will then allow for your muscles to recover. And when your muscles break down, when you're in the gym, they recover, they build back up even more, right? So that's kind of how that works. So training, right? So biggest thing you want to focus on is taking shorter rest periods. So 30 to 60 seconds of rest rather than longer rest periods. So like typically like 90 seconds. The reason for that is because again, you're taking less of a break. It's more of like a muscular endurance type of workout. And so you're allowing yourself to increase your cardiovascular rate, which will then help you a lot with increasing your metabolic rate as well. Go higher in reps and lower in weight. A lot of people, they tend to focus on going on like lower reps and higher weight, which tends to build more strength, but it doesn't necessarily help a lot with fat loss. And you can also maintain, if not build, the muscle that you have as long as you are in between that 12 to 15 rep range per set. And so the goal to increase or gain more muscle is to increase the weight gradually every week by 2.5 to 5 pounds for progressive overload. And so then you want to take that proper recovery step, 7 to 8 hours of sleep, at least 72 ounces of water daily to make sure that you can be replenished for the next day. So that's just the basics of how you can train to make sure that you're not losing fat, or you are losing fat while not losing muscle at the same time. And nutrition. So you want to be able to calculate your maintenance calories and subtract between 300 to 500 calories to ensure that you're at a caloric deficit. You don't want to go beyond that to start, because a lot of people, they get way too aggressive with it, and they tend to just like hurt their bodies because they went in too far of a deficit. So you want to like slowly increase that deficit and then go backwards on that deficit over time, because the whole goal is to get your metabolic rate up, right? So you want to calculate your macros within that deficit to ensure that you're getting the proper nutrients that you need so your body has the fuel to support, to maintain the muscle that you build while training. So for example, it could be 25% carbs, 45% protein, 30% fats, right? I've used that for a client before. That's worked really well. Increase your caloric intake gradually as your metabolic rate increases. Like I've literally been saying this whole time, that's like the key. And then the goal is to supercharge your metabolism to burn calories even while you're resting. Like while I sit down here, I could burn 2,400 calories in a day just sitting. That's the goal. That's what you want. So that way you can remain lean and you can also build muscle at the same time. That is the end of this short presentation, but did you guys have any questions for me? Anything specific around what I just put together?
Let's conquer the world together. That's why I created Training Grounds. Training Grounds is the ultimate self-development and fitness community where you'll learn training, nutrition, build social skills, and network. You need to have a community of men around you that are elevating you on a day-to-day basis, that's going through a lot of the trials and tribulations, so that way you don't feel alone. That's why I created Training Grounds. You'll learn how to build an incredible business for yourself from me. So tap in, link is in the description. Become a conqueror, be around other conquerors, and let's conquer the world together. I'm gonna catch you in Training Grounds.